right, let's get you set for primary election day coming up on Tuesday, and I've got just the group to do it. Great to have with me today Stephen Henderson from WDET and Detroit Today. Caitlin Buss is the assistant editorial page editor at the Detroit News, back with us again. Longtime journalist in Detroit, now the head of McConnell Communications. Darcy McConnell is here, and Steve Mitchell from Mitchell Research. Steve, let me start with you. I'm really curious to ask all of you what it is that you want to watch for, what you're most keen to see the outcome of on Tuesday. We're all obviously interested in what happens with the GOP race for governor, but what is kind of what is your eye going to be directed to?
In addition to the race for governor, I think on the Republican ticket, what happens in the 3rd congressional seat over in Grand Rapids? Yeah. I've always been under the impression that that seat was going to go to the pro-Trump candidate, but I took a peek at it since I own a polling company, and Peter Meyer may actually win that one.
That's one of the districts we've talked about that has been completely shifted. It's still Grand Rapids, but the district has moved west instead where it used to go from Grand Rapids east, and John Gibbs is the guy you're talking about. Darcy, how about you? What are you looking for?
Can I have 3 answers?
Sure, absolutely. We've got time.
That's cheating.
Okay.
Let me write this down.
I'm not here often, so I get to cheat a little bit, Stephen. So the 13th congressional district, of course, with so many African American candidates, so much money. That's one. The 10th, I think the 10th will be interesting with a race to watch on the Democratic side. We've got named candidates, some new candidates, and then the third piece is sort of what will the turnout be like, right?
As I mentioned at the top of the program.
In terms of the absentee and.
Right.
And on election day, so I'm pretty concerned about that.
Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned it off the top of the program. We've seen a lot of voter engagement over these last couple elections, but an early August primary is still an early August primary, and some people see reason to get out and others won't. What are you looking for?
I'm interested in watching some of these GOP legislative races where Trump has, played and asked to say, endorse candidates or not. I'm interested to see if that finally works itself out in the wash. I'm very interested in these local congressional races, the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th districts. That'll be really interesting to watch. And then, of course, the GOP race and where that comes out.
It's really interesting what you mentioned about the legislative race. The Trump endorsement in the governor's race and in the congressional races has gotten so much attention. He's endorsed a lot of challengers to get into the legislature against Republican incumbents, which is really going to be an interesting scorecard to read on Wednesday morning.
And hopefully we can get some more clarity on where voters feel on all that.
Yeah. How about you, Stephen?
So the legislative races in Detroit, which have so many split districts now between suburbs and city. I'm really curious to see how those shake out in the early part of this redraw, right? This is the first election under the new maps. I think it'll look different by the 3rd election or maybe the 4th. But how it shakes out in that first election will be interesting. And then, of course, the 13th. I mean, all the money that has been spent in that race by candidates, by outside groups. What does Detroit end up with in that really critical role?
Darcy kind of pointed to this earlier too, that these two races, and we talked about this last week on Flashpoint, there really are not now districts that are just about Detroit. And we had one of the co-chairs of the redistricting commission came out this week and said that the lawyers were directing a lot of how this shaped, which I think she was suggesting left maybe some disenfranchisement of black voters happening.
Well, I mean, yes, no question. They look much different than what we had before. Are they districts that won't likely elect African Americans in the long term? I guess I'm not as sure. Even those split
we can boil it down to one race. Fair enough.
I mean, even those split legislative districts, if you look at them, they are districts that will likely elect African Americans if there's an African American on the ballot. The question is whether that's an African American from the city or the suburbs. I think about the census results that we just got. For the first time ever, we have more African Americans living outside the city than inside the city. Those inner ring suburbs, you get the right black candidate to appeal to Detroiters, blacks in the suburbs, and white voters. And that will change. Now, I think it's going to take a little bit for that to take hold, for candidates to realize, hey, I have a shot at this race, and to put their names in. This time, no question, we will see, I think, an erosion of that.
I think the number I heard was going from 22 to 9. So I think we are going to feel the impact pretty quickly here. So that's concerning. And then as far as what the commissioner said, I don't know what the recourse is. I mean, they've lost in court.
Right.
I don't know, maybe a ballot initiative to do redistricting.
Here we go
sooner.
again.
I don't
Back to
know.
government by referendum. Steve, it's interesting though. There is a way, if certain things thread the needle here. Let's say that John James wins his race. Let's say John Gibbs wins in the race you were talking about over on the west side of the state. And then let's say Sri Thanedar wins in the 13th and that Rashida Tlaib returns to Congress. You could have two members of Congress from the state of Michigan who are African American, but they would both be Republicans.
I think it's very likely that you're going to have one Republican African American, John James. I'm not sure that John Gibbs is going to win the primary or the general. I also feel pretty comfortable that Sri Thanedar and Rashida Tlaib will both win those seats in the 12th and 13th.
Sri Thanedar winning, Caitlin, we've kind of talked about this a lot. There are a lot of really good candidates running in that race, and they split the vote, and Sri runs right up the middle. Is that?
But he has obviously the most money. I think that's his biggest.
Hard to miss.
Yeah, but I think we're looking at overall with this redistricting and new candidates like in this race. You have a new leadership. You have kind of a younger generation of people coming in to run too, and the issues that the city and the suburbs are going to be dealing with the demographic changes, they're going to be dealt with differently. I mean, these new elected officials have new districts, and kind of they have to take a new approach to some of these issues that have been like black and white. You know, not just in race, but in people's approach to them too. So there's a new mold coming out, I think, that we're going to see.
Well, I'm more pessimistic than him about John James and Sri Thanedar. I'll just put that.
So listen, I mean, I am as concerned as any Detroiter is about the idea of not having an African American from Detroit in Congress. This will be the first time since 1955 that was true. That's not progress, right?
I thought it was the early 60s. It was back to John Conyers. Was it before
Charles
that?
Diggs.
Oh, Charles Diggs.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Very first African American from Detroit elected to Congress. At the same time, I think you got to look also at the people who are involved here. Rashida Tlaib is not African American, and African American politicians, I think, have some discomfort with her in some ways. But African American voters are really enthusiastic about her representation of them so far in Congress. They vote for her in large numbers. They did when she was in the state legislature. And Sri Thanedar represents a black district in the legislature now. Black voters sent him to Lansing to represent them. I don't think we can just say that they are not representative of Detroit. They are not representative of the majority race in the city, and that's concerning. And look, there's a history dimension to all of this that's important. But I think in terms of representation, Rashida Tlaib is a great rep for Congress for people in Detroit. And
I had an interesting point made to me by a good friend of mine who's African American. He said he thinks it's a good thing. The fact is that the African Americans aren't just voting for African Americans because they're African Americans and so is the candidate. That shows.
Which was this monolithic assumption.
That's right.
That people
and
have
I think
made
that
for
and
too
he
long.
was complimenting the African American community for doing that. And he is, by the way, a fellow that is supporting very strongly one of the African American candidates in the race. But I thought that was a very good point.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's one thing to say that, obviously they had enough support to get in there. That's different than talking about this historic loss of an African-American individual who brings life experience, which is one distinction,
Absolutely.
obvious distinction that you would have versus a Sri.
Well, and if it was, and we saw this when Rashida won her seat to begin with. You had a lot of African American candidates that split a lot of votes. If it was Sri Thanedar just against, say, Portia Roberson or Adam Ollier, it might be a different race.
There's also a more local race, the 8th Senate District, where you have Marshall Bullock and Mallory McMorrow. And so you have some interesting, demographic changes there, and she's got a ton of money now and was able to kind of, surpass him. But she doesn't have that lived experience, that you're mentioning. And so that district will, identity-wise will be
She's built a massive profile over her comments that got so much attention in the legislature.
But you have someone like Bullock, who's a legislative leader,
and
a loss if he loses.
Well, I think some would argue a loss either way. In fact, I believe that's the one state Senate race where two incumbents ended up having to run against each other because of redistricting.
I think that's right.
Let's turn our attention, though, if we could, to the governor's race then. Steve, the Trump endorsement, we all assume means an awful lot. But I think to a lot of Republicans, they've had a hard time finding even a playing card's width of difference between the positions of these five. And I think they're going to support whoever comes out on Tuesday anyway.
I
right?
think that's absolutely correct. Tudor Dixon has been ahead in the polls now for about a month. One came out on Friday by Trafalgar, showing her up by 9. I've had her up to 11, then 8, now 6. But obviously, Donald Trump weighing in on this race is enormously important, and I think that cements the nomination when a candidate gets that endorsement. And Tudor Dixon has been working hard on it. He's the only time Trump's ever mentioned a candidate, it's been Tudor Dixon. So I think that's a game changer, especially given the lead that Tudor Dixon has right now.
If you're Gretchen, is there, obviously, I think a lot of Democrats would love to see Ryan Kelly, for instance, be the, that he would be the easier, easier run for her. It is different if for Gretchen Whitmer, if she ends up running against Tudor Dixon, woman to woman is a different conversation, for instance, on abortion than it is if she's facing off with a man, right?
No, not really. I think they're all pretty much in sync in terms of their positions.
True, but
everything that's coming out of late pretty much points to whoever is running against her is looking pretty slim to none in terms of their chances of beating her right now. Anything can change, right?
Long way to go.
We do have a long way to go. But right now, I mean, I think there's like 37% undecided on the GOP side. And then you also have this divide where people are like, Trump, don't back the DeVos people. Like, it's like all this bizarre stuff going on.
Betsy DeVos writing the letter to Donald Trump trying to create some more unity here. Caitlin, the Republican Party right now is such a fascinating, it's like going to one of those really dysfunctional family reunions.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Not the Bus family, no. But I mean, this is really, and if the schism remains, it's really hard to see Republicans making hay in a year that everybody thought was really a year for them to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate for them that this schism exists, although they have very much created it and played into it. But I think when you're looking at voters, I think voters at the end of the day are still very concerned about the economy right now. And that's the only thing that I see going for Republicans right now is that they might just be so concerned that they're willing to vote for whatever the Republican candidate is.
And you've got a president who's got a 37% job approval. That's 7 points lower than where Donald Trump was 4 years ago. And that's the big problem that Democrats have. And it's going to be very difficult for Republicans to win in that environment.
You get the last 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I think Republicans got to get their act together in that field, but it's not going to matter that much in the fall. I don't see them beating Gretchen Whitmer.
Okay.